Here we are, back together again, friends, for another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Erica's 5-year-old son has type 1 diabetes. She has 2 boys. Her husband just got a type 2 diagnosis, but it seems clear he's LADA. And we talk today about what it's like to raise a child with type 1 diabetes. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. Don't forget, if you're a U.S. resident who has type 1 or is the caregiver of someone with type 1, visit t1dexchange.org/juicebox right now and complete that survey. It will take you 10 minutes to complete the survey, and that effort alone will help to move type 1 diabetes research forward. It will cost you nothing to help. Don't forget to save 40% off of your entire order at CozyEarth.com. All you have to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. That's JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% at CozyEarth.com. If you or a loved one was just diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and you're looking for some fresh perspective, the Bold Beginnings series from the Juicebox Podcast is a terrific place to start. That series is with myself and Jenny Smith. Jenny is a CDCES, a registered dietitian, and a type 1 for over 35 years. Having an easy-to-use and accurate blood glucose meter is just one click away. ContourNext.com/juicebox. That's right. Today's episode is sponsored by the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Dexcom G7, the same CGM that my daughter wears. Check it out now at Dexcom.com/juicebox.
My name is Erica. I have a son who is 5 now, who is type 1 diabetic. He was diagnosed at 3.5, and we've just kind of been going along as we can. And I've learned a lot from this podcast. So I think more than at a doctor's office, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah, I know that's how it feels. It feels that way to me, even if you're wondering.
Yeah.
So wait, he's 5. He was diagnosed at 3.5?
3.5, yep.
So about 1.5 years. And
yeah.
Other diabetes in your immediate family or your extended family?
No real significant, some type 2. My husband has some form of diabetes. It was very sudden after COVID. They have him treated as type 2, but he's had some lab work done that they think it might be like late onset type 1.
Mm-hmm.
Other than those two, no.
How about in his extended family? Do we see celiac, thyroid, vitiligo, bipolar disorder, anything inflammation related?
Some thyroid, but that's really it.
Not him?
No, not him. Mm-mm.
Okay. Not that I'm saying it's him, but the frequency in which I meet people who are like, no, I don't have a thyroid issue.
Yeah.
They test it, though. They keep after it. I was like, oh, what's your TSH? Like, well, it's 5. But the doctor says it's okay. And I was like, how do you feel? And they're like, well, I'm tired all the time. I have muscle aches and joint pain. My hair falls out. But it's not my thyroid because that's in range. And I went, yeah, okay.
Right. Yeah.
Every day. By the way, every day. And then I just sent a family friend to their doctor because they have all these symptoms. TSH is, 5.5. And the doctor goes, nah, it's not that. And I was like, but you have 5 thyroid symptoms and TSH is 5.5. And the doctor's like, yeah, we're going to, and by the way, elevated liver enzymes, which are another thing that you can have happen if you have untreated thyroid and all. Anyway, it's just really funny how I guess my point is I don't know how many people are walking around with an unbalanced thyroid who think it is. I know.
Yeah. And the people who there's a ton of people who have thyroid issues that you would think that more people have to have it. Why is that not
Yeah. Or you have it and the doctor doesn't give you the correct medication, or you don't take the medication.
Right.
Trust me, there's a lot of people dragging their ass that don't need to be.
Yeah.
That's all. That was my point. Okay. So your husband probably has LADA, but they're telling you it's type 2.
Yeah. They have him labeled as type 2. He's being treated as type 2, but he wears a Dexcom just so that they can keep tabs on what happens with his blood sugar. He's lost like almost 100 pounds and still needs medication and Trulicity to keep his blood sugars in range. So
has he lost 100 pounds because he's been trying to lose 100 pounds, or do you think he's been in and out of DKA?
I don't know about in and out of DK. He hasn't had any other symptoms, but since diagnosis, he had lost about 30 pounds before he was diagnosed, just out of the blue. And then he started having similar symptoms to my son with the urinating and the very thirsty. Then they diagnosed him with type 2, I think just because he was over 30 and about overweight. Then they ran some blood work and his GAD antibodies came back a little elevated. All the other ones seem to be okay for now, but I mean, they keep testing them. I don't know. Especially now their son's diagnosed. They're like, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, I was going to say, did that spark anybody's like interest?
The endo, my son's endo at our children's hospital found it very interesting. And he was like, if I could test him and run things, I would. His doctor, it was more, I find it kind of frustrating, honestly, because we have to be the one to be like, listen here, our son was diagnosed. I find that bizarre and completely out of the blue that now he's, it was right after he was sick too. He was diagnosed. So it's been more us fighting almost. We had to ask them, can you please rerun this blood work? And that was about a year ago. So every year we just kind of, I'll pay for it, but I would like to know. I have another son who isn't right now type 1, and I want to have him screened. If I really do think that, if his dad has it and his brother has it, I would like to know that.
Can I just point you to a new sponsor, screenfortype1.com?
Yeah, I just saw that yesterday that you had posted that. I'm gonna look into that.
Yeah, thank you. Feel free to use my links.
Yeah.
So listen, I'm not a doctor, so sometimes people say things to me, and I'm only drawing off my personal experience or a conversation I've had on the podcast, right? So I did go to ChatGPT 4.0, and I asked it. I said, ChatGPT 4.0, what do elevated GAD antibodies indicate? And it says type 1 diabetes, latent autoimmune diabetes in adults, and those are the two things that it indicates. And it goes farther into that. And I said, would that appear with type 2 diabetes? And it said, GAD antibodies are not typically associated with type 2 diabetes. So elevated GAD antibodies typically indicate an autoimmune response against the insulin-producing beta cells in the pancreas. So I don't understand, the people not...
Why they're questioning it? Yeah, I don't know. And according to them, when he was first diagnosed, the cutoff is 5 and his was at 6. So, and I again, I'm not a doctor. I work in pharmacy, but I don't know anything, about GAD antibodies and all of that. I don't know if that goes up over time, if that level would go up, if that's what they're looking for. I don't know the reasoning behind not thinking like, boom, yes, this is definitely type 1, or if it's because, with, my son and probably most type 1s, obviously, once your body stops making insulin, it's very evident. Where my understanding, the LADA is slower. So I don't know if it's because he's got a slower response to not making insulin. And that's why I have no idea.
Well, Erica, can I tell you what the thing that some people think is going to end the world and some people think it's going to save it thinks?
Yeah.
It says the levels of GAD antibodies do not typically increase over time. Instead, their presence usually indicates an ongoing autoimmune process.
Okay.
So
that's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, I'm going to say that I've said this a couple of times in the podcast. I know some people probably think I'm crazy. Some of the best conversations I've had over the last couple of months have been with ChatGPT 4.0 because everything I wonder, it's like, oh yeah, here, this, and here's why. Yeah. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Listen, I'm not jumping ahead, but there is some point in time in the future where you will think a think, and your thinker will go to something else, and that thing will tell your thinker what you know, and now you'll know it. And it's just really fascinating how quickly and directly and completely it does this. And the reason I bring it up is because all I have is a web portal, and I pay $20 a month for this. And you'd think a doctor wouldn't go, I don't know. You know what I mean?
I know.
I think they'd go, hey, I bet you there's 1,000 ways we could find out. Hold on one second. What are they managing your husband with? That was my question.
He takes metformin daily, and then he's on Trulicity once weekly.
And does he have excursions at meals with his blood sugar?
Certain things he does. When he got diagnosed, he was originally on Humalog and Lantus. So they were doing that. And then they ran all this blood work, and they're like, oh, no, we're not finding anything to make sure you don't need to be on insulin every day, every meal, long-term insulin every night. And then they switched him. But if he eats, let's say pizza or he has a huge breakfast with toast and potatoes for breakfast. It's very evident. You can see his blood sugar spikes probably higher than it should.
To where? Do you have a number?
Around 300.
Oh, yeah, he needs insulin.
Yes.
Yeah. That's not for metformin to deal with.
I know. Like last night we had pizza at my grandma's, and his blood sugar when we got home was like, and this was hours after 200.
Yeah.
Which
yeah,
I'm not diabetic. My blood sugar wasn't 200 after pizza.
No, he needs
a
doctor who can like think completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree.
I wouldn't wait.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
We're going to find a new endo in a different location, I hope.
Right.
I don't mean that bad, but like, especially after my son being diagnosed and talking with his endo, it's like, come on, somebody's got to know. And I don't know if it's, you can't teach an old dog new tricks kind of thing where they're so set in their ways. And there's been now so many like subcategories of diabetes that people are like, oh no, it's only type 1 or type 2. And there's that, that fine line, but it's becoming, and I was told this we live in Michigan, like Helena Voss Children's Hospital, that no, that fine line's getting more blurred. And I don't know if we just have to find an endo that knows that.
A lot of people talk and say things.
Yeah.
People hear things. They don't completely understand them. They pass them on. They have experiences. They let it color their, it happens to me. It happens to everybody, right? Like I see something and I tend to believe that that's the case. You need somebody who's willing to step back and try to just see it fresh eyes, And the truth is that there's no world where I don't care what he eats. His blood sugar shouldn't be going to 300.
Nope.
I don't care if it's pizza. That doesn't matter to me. I had pizza the other night and I was wearing a CGM.
Yeah.
And pizza combined with a GLP medication in a person who doesn't have diabetes, my blood sugar never moved off of 89 ever.
See, exactly. Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what Trulicity should be doing, right? If you're not diabetic. And
I mean,
he was on Ozempic, same kind of thing. I mean, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you would think, because Trulicity is a GLP, right? It is, just an older one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you would think if he's on, what did they used to call it? Once weekly Trulicity. Is that what they called it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And metformin, and they think he's type 2-ish. I don't care. Like, I guess it doesn't matter to me if he's type 2 or type 1. I don't want his blood sugar to go to 300 and stay there for hours. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I agree. Yeah. I find this, I get so heated talking because I get so frustrated because here I am, as a mom of a 5-year-old, and it's like in every bone of my body to make sure he understands how to work his insulin so he can be a kid and eat those things and someday go to college and be an adult and live a long, happy life and not be running around with a blood sugar of 200, 300, you know? And then I have my husband who, like, because he's not a kid, it just seems like people are like, oh, it's fine. I'm like, well, I still want him to like die at 50. I mean, he's still young.
How old are you? 35? You've lived your life. It's fine.
Exactly. It's like, come on. What?
That's not even it.
My kid learning from that too. It's just bizarre.
It's just a lack of... The Dexcom G7 is sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast, and it features a lightning fast 30-minute warm-up time. That's right. From the time you put on the Dexcom G7 till the time you're getting readings, 30 minutes. That's pretty great. It also has a 12-hour grace period, so you can swap your sensor when it's convenient for you. All of that on top of it being small, accurate, incredibly wearable, and light. These things, in my opinion, make the Dexcom G7 a no-brainer. The Dexcom G7 comes with way more than just this. Up to 10 people can follow you. You can use it with type 1, type 2, or gestational diabetes. It's covered by all sorts of insurances. And this might be the best part. It might be the best part. Alerts and alarms that are customizable so that you can be alerted at the levels that make sense to you. Dexcom.com/juicebox. Links in the show notes. Links at juiceboxpodcast.com to Dexcom and all the sponsors. When you use my links, you're supporting the production of the podcast and helping to keep it free and plentiful. The Contour NextGen blood glucose meter is the meter that we use here. Arden has one with her at all times. I have one downstairs in the kitchen, just in case I want to check my blood sugar. And Arden has them at school. They're everywhere that she is. ContourNext.com/juicebox. Test strips and the meters themselves may be less expensive for you in cash out of your pocket than you're paying currently through your insurance for another meter. You can find out about that and much more at my link, ContourNext.com/juicebox. Contour makes a number of fantastic and accurate meters, And their second chance test strips are absolutely my favorite part. What does that mean? If you go to get some blood and maybe you touch it and, I don't know, stumble with your hand and like slip off and go back, it doesn't impact the quality or accuracy of the test. So you can hit the blood, not get enough, come back, get the rest without impacting the accuracy of the test. That's right. You can touch the blood, come back and get the rest, and you're going to get an absolutely accurate test. I think that's important because we all stumble and fumble at times. That's not a good reason to have to waste a test strip. And with the Contour NextGen, you won't have to. ContourNext.com/juicebox. You're going to get a great reading without having to be perfect. I don't know what it is. I mean, I have these conversations with doctors all the time, and I can't figure out what it is. But it's, in the end, it's the coin flip of dealing with people. Like, you get who you get, and sometimes you get a great one, and sometimes you don't. And that's what. And everyone's going to seem like they know what they're talking about because they're going to.
That's exactly right, and they don't like to hear that it might be something else that someone else said. Because then I'm not right. We go to my son's endo tomorrow, and I'm going to just ask, like, where can I get this figured out with fresh eye? Like, who do you think he would have someone to recommend? I would think. Yeah. I really like how he thinks and what he says.
Right. Can you find a guy for my husband who's not going to tell him he has type 2 diabetes and take metformin and then tell him what's happening because he'll recognize it as type 1 immediately.
Yeah. When my son got diagnosed, we were actually in the hospital in the ICU. I was talking to him. He came in and we had a very long conversation, and he had never even met my husband at this point. And he was like, "Oh, your husband's for sure type 1." And I was like, "Okay." So like I've only talked to him as much as I've talked to you. And he already was like, "No, he's type 1. If you look at my son's chart, they have my husband labeled as type 1. The Children's Hospital does. Of course, yeah. Just based on what I've told them. So it's just crazy.
Of course. Now you have a doctor and a podcaster agreeing with you. So you must be on the right track.
We must be right.
I've given myself over to it, Erica, by the way. I'm a podcaster. I used to say like, "Oh no, I do this, but I have a podcast." I'm like, I got to give that up now. Like I got to
give it up.
Yeah, I got to embrace this thing. Like let's just be. It's funny when I tell young people, they're like, "Really?" They get super like interested. Like you don't see young people like laser focused very often, and they're like, "Hey, what is your like?" You'll be together with a bunch of people, or like my daughter brings somebody new home or something, and like the kids. They've been trained to try to act like humans, so they ask questions they don't care the answer for. They're like, what do you do, sir? And I'm like, "Oh, sir, this is nice. I like this." And I say, I make a podcast. And they're like, "What, really?" Because they're like in my home. You know what I mean? Like they walked past a mailbox. They're like, "This guy pays his bills with a podcast?" And I was like, "Well, the lady makes money too, but like, yeah." Yeah. And then they get super interested. If I tell somebody over the age of like, honestly, like 28, what I do, they're like, "Oh, this guy is probably homeless." Like he doesn't have, I can't ask him for $1. He doesn't have it. He makes a podcast because they all have friends who think they're influencers.
Oh, it's
fantastic. Eric, I swear to God, I know no one will ever hear this that can like drill this down, but my daughter's high school graduation, all the kids are like, "I'm thinking of going to this college. I might go to this one. I've got a job. I'm going to do this." This one kid, I said, "Hey, what do you got planned?" He goes, "I'm going to become an influencer." I was like, "You're just going to become it?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "How are you going to do that?" He goes, "I'm traveling overseas and I'm going to like go on," I forget if he said it was an adventure or something like that. I was like, "Oh, this kid's going to get killed." He's like, "I'm going overseas and blah, blah, and I'm just going to document everything and put it online and blah, blah, blah." My daughter comes to me like 8 months later and she goes, "Remember that kid?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Here's a picture of him in a bar with men 25 years older than him." And I was like, "Oh, he is definitely going to end up dead."
For sure.
There were almost 20 people following him on his account. So I think he's really
20, wow.
Oh, yeah, he's onto something.
He's onto something.
But Erica, all I could think was, why when I was 17 did my parents not have enough money to let me travel abroad and pretend that I was starting a career?
Right. Where are these kids getting all this? It's nuts.
Unreal. You live in Michigan.
Yeah.
You know about working. I know where you live.
Yeah.
Yeah. So military, right? Working, the area you're from?
Yeah. Very blue collar.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're in like Western Michigan. So Grand Rapids area. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of, yep.
Okay. No. It's a nice place. I know people live there.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this kid of yours, 3.5 years. How many kids do you have, first of all?
I have 2. Yep. 2 boys.
Are they what ages?
7 and 5.
Okay. So the 5-year-old a year and a half ago, what? Peeing, thirsty, that stuff?
His little daycare school program on a Thursday started just complaining about being really thirsty, wanting more water. Thursday night, he starts wetting the bed, which he never had an issue with after potty training. So at first I was like, oh, that's, kind of weird, but okay. Friday comes, we're supposed to be leaving that Saturday to go out of town for a wedding. Friday comes and he's more thirsty at daycare. And then Friday night, we're in our backyard having a bonfire and me and my husband are there. And he, I'm not even kidding you, in an hour asked me for like at least 4 bottles of water and chugged them. And he probably peed like 8 times.
Yeah.
And I looked right at my husband and I said, I know exactly what this is. I said, and I am not going out of town with this kid because I will not end up somewhere that I don't know with my kid in the hospital.
Right.
And I work at a hospital in the pharmacy. So I took him, I said, my husband, I'm just going to take him in. In my gut, I knew we probably aren't coming home tonight, but I took him in. They poked his finger right then in triage and it didn't register a number. So right then his blood sugar was like over 500. Sent us all back and we didn't have to wait, obviously. They put us in and do a bunch of work, blood work. And a little bit later they come in and his blood sugar was 794 and he was starting to spill ketones. He had just had like a bedtime snack, obviously without insulin because we didn't know at this time. This all happened at the same time. So I think his blood sugar was probably that high because of what he had too. Doesn't matter. So then right then they started him on an insulin drip and ambulanced us to the children's hospital. And we were in the ICU.
What was his A1C?
8.7.
Yeah, you caught it very fast.
Yes, we caught it very early. The endo was like shocked. They were like, how did you know? And it was honestly because I had watched my husband, the exact same thing.
Really?
I was like, yeah, it was like spinning in my husband even had said to me, he's like, if this is what this was with me, he's like, you could keep giving that kid water and he will not quench his thirst. And between like, me watching him do what my husband did and him saying that to me, I was like, okay. Like I just knew in my gut.
Yeah.
I was like, oh.
How recently prior to your son's diagnosis did your husband go through that? Like how, you know what I mean?
My husband was diagnosed January of 2021. And then my son was October of 22. So about a year and a half-ish, a little bit more.
Okay. So it was fresh enough in your head that you remembered.
Yeah.
And you really acted on it too.
Yeah. I think if we wouldn't have been going out of town, I don't know, I say that, but I still think in my gut, I knew enough to be like, even if we weren't going out of town, I still would have taken him in that night. But I just remember telling my mom and my sister who were supposed to go into the same wedding. I was like, I'm taking him in. And they're like, okay. Like, I think they thought I was crazy. And then I remember being in the hospital and giving them an update and being like, oh yeah, we're being transferred to Children's. And the ICU, and my mom was like, oh shit. Like at that moment, I think they were like, you're not crazy. But I just knew, like mom gut's real. I think I've always stood by that. And then once I kind of put that with watching the same thing with my husband, I was like, yeah. Yeah.
I say this sometimes, but I find it interesting. The Egyptians, like ancient Egyptians, they recognized diabetes. They didn't understand like the pathology of it, but they called it the Great Drain because they believed that you were urinating yourself to death.
Yeah, and it literally looks like it's insane. Like watching somebody with a blood sugar that high. I mean, I'm glad I didn't wait because who knows what would have happened. I'm glad that I knew enough.
Yeah.
With that and some of my medical background because it literally does. Like, how does somebody consume that much water too? He was 3.5. He's tiny. I mean, there's no reason you should be that thirsty. But
also, you just can't afford it, to be honest. Like once the 4th bottle of water comes out, you're like, listen, I don't know what you think we got going on over here, but
it's at least $2, man.
I'm doing the math and we're going to be broke by Wednesday. So,
sure.
Let's get you to the hospital. Unless health insurance wants to start paying for bottled water, and then maybe we can keep going a little longer. Well, it's really cool that you caught it that quickly. Now, how does the hospital handle it? Because he's not that far along. Do they keep him for a while, or how did they talk to you about it?
So it was a Friday.
Now you're stuck there for the weekend then.
Yeah, it was a weekend. Right. But they were actually really awesome. His endo that came in, I don't know if I know on your website you have some lists of that, Children's Hospital, but the endo that is actually his was on call that weekend. We just looked up. He's the chief of the department.
That is lucky.
Yeah. So he came in and we were kind of talking and my husband had gotten brought up and they had I work in pharmacy and I have some medical background. So they actually only made us stay one night. We met with a dietitian that day. They called one in for us. and kind of were like, here's his ratios to start with. Here's what you're going to do. And even though I knew I had the basis of it, I mean, he's still 3.5. It was still kind of nerve wracking to be like, oh God, like I'm in charge of this kid.
Oh,
you know, it's like leaving the hospital with a brand new baby where you're like, oh, okay, I guess now I have to keep this kid alive. But like more so, you know, 10 times more.
Erica, one of the like enduring horrible memories of my life is the moment it occurred to me in the hospital that I was a stay-at-home dad. Because it was such a blur. It was, we were days into it, and you know, they're giving you classes and everything, and it hit me out of nowhere. I was like, oh my God, we're gonna go home. My wife's gonna go to work.
Yes,
and I'm gonna be here with this 2-year-old kid that has diabetes, and there's needles and like math, and that was overwhelming. Like I still remember how it felt.
Math and needles, but like math, that's a guess. You know, they're guessing like, okay, based on his age and his weight and how, you know, this is where you're starting with ratios. But like my son specifically with those, I mean, he was tiny, those little Humalog vials pens, you know, the doses, he's so sensitive to insulin that like we were either having to make him eat enough to make up for what insulin we're giving him, or we were just giving him food because it wouldn't work. So the math wasn't even mathing. You know, you're like, this math that they're giving us is not good enough. It was.
How about when the nurse comes in and she says, well, here's your blood glucose meter. And I was like, okay. She goes, we're going to practice together. And I was like, oh, we're practicing. That's nice. And so she's like, I'm going to use my meter because I have to put it into charting, and you'll use your meter. And I thought, why can't you just use my meter to put it into charting? But okay. And so she tests Arden's blood sugar with her meter, and the number comes up, whatever it is. I forget the exact number. And then I test with the meter they gave us to go home with, and the number was like 25, 30 points different. And I was like, well, which one's right? And I remember her saying, what? And I went, well, the meter you have said that, and the meter you gave me said this, and mine looks like it fell out of a bubblegum machine, and yours looks like it cost $20,000. So like, is yours right and this one's wrong? Like every time I test her blood sugar, should I just assume it's 20 points higher than this because that, you know what I mean? I'm like, and she's like, no, don't worry about that. And that was the end of that direction. And I was like, and it's funny because still on the podcast today, when people ask me about that, I go, yeah, I know. It doesn't end up being too much of a problem. Like just, and it really,
it's so true. In the beginning, you know, every little thing, it's like, I mean, we're almost 2 years in now, and I can kind of look at a meal, you know, and kind of, I was counting every single carb, and I was measuring and weighing everything because that's how in your brain you realize, okay, I have to keep this good. But now it's like after 2 years, I mean, what is 20 points difference really?
Isn't it funny?
In those first, you get so like immune to it and comfortable. And now I can like look at a meal like, oh, it's probably about that many carbs. And you just kind of catch a high or catch a low as you go. And I mean, hope for the best kind of.
I almost hate to say it, but I agree with you. If you didn't have diabetes, and you were trying to like chart your blood sugar, and your blood sugar was really 89 and you thought it was 109, well, that's a big problem. But if you have type 1 and your blood sugar is somewhere between 89 and 109, I mean, you're just killing it. You know what I mean? Like,
like, dang, all right. That meal was, I mean, it is just funny how, and then the doctors, I think if you don't live it, I mean, endos, they're great dietitians, the diabetic educators, they all know like the books part of it, you know, and they've learned a lot, obviously. But I think unless one of the diabetic educators at my son's office is a type 1, and like I would choose to pick her to talk to over. If you live it, you just get it more, I think.
Yeah.
So that nurse being like, oh, at 20, but you know, at the beginning of a diagnosis, that's scary.
When you don't know what anybody's talking about, you're like, I don't understand. Why does it not matter that these two numbers aren't the same?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's my point. Yep.
And by the way, perfect world, it does matter. And it would be nice if all the technology, and again, I want to point out, Arden was diagnosed when she was 4, and she's going to be 20 next week. So this was 16 years ago.
Yeah, I could not imagine.
That young nurse who told me that is 40 now. So,
yeah. Yep.
Because she looked like she started like the week before, and now she's literally probably 40 years old now. I tried one time to reach out to the doctor at the diagnosis. She's like, I'm retired. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm old. I forgot. You get this information. I mean, I assume I'm going to ask your situation at home. Are you a stay-at-home parent, or are you the one that's with your kids, or how does it work?
We have a very weird dynamic. I work third shift at a hospital and I do week on, week off. So during the day, I am home. And then on my week off, I'm home. And then the weeks I'm at work at night, my husband is home at night. So it's my husband and I are a great team. We do a very good juggling act. I could not do it without him. He could not do it without me. I would hope he would stay. We're both home with him at all times, but we both work. So
how do you do that? How do you work for a week and then not work for a week and then work for a week? Doesn't it make you mental every time you have to go back to work?
Yes, I get pissed every Wednesday. I'm like, God, I do Wednesday to Tuesday night. And I get very, very mad. I've actually been off for 2 weeks. I have one more week off because I took a week of PTO and I am not going to want to go back next week because after 3 weeks off, it's going to be like,
When Kelly and I were first married, we went on a vacation for like 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And we came back on like Sunday afternoon and we were sitting, in the living room. We were doing laundry that we brought back from the vacations and we were really young. Like, I want to be honest, like we were like, first of all, we were too young to get married. And like, when we were really young, like I was maybe 24 and she was like 22. You know what I mean? Like, and we had just like taken off these 2 weeks. We're sitting there watching something on television on Sunday evening, and I spontaneously, and I mean out of nowhere, start to cry. She's like, "Oh my God, what's wrong?" And I was like, "I do not want to go back to work." And I wasn't kidding. Yeah.
That'll be me. I sit there every, Tuesday night before I go back, and my husband and I watch TV after the kids go to bed. And I'm like, I don't want to go back to work. And he goes, "You say this every Tuesday." I know, but I feel the same every Tuesday.
It's a very consistent feeling, which is why you're getting a very consistent response from me.
Right. It must be real.
No, it just hit me like once you're in the swing of it, it is what it is. But like you stopping and starting, like, oh.
I have to just remind myself, like between my husband and my son, they both have CGMs and my son wears an Omnipod. And I'm very, very grateful where I work. I have very good insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to work for the health insurance. I mean,
yeah,
it is what it is. So if you put it in that way, like I don't really have a choice. I have to go. I don't want to, but I have to.
Yeah, I've noticed things are easier when you don't have a choice.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so like, is there a main caregiver of the diabetes, or are you guys like literally a team on it?
As far as like home life, we very much are a team. As now, when it comes to like schools, because I'm home during the day, when he's in school, I am the one who trains the teachers usually and the nurse and all of that. And when it comes to appointments, I bring him to appointments. But I mean, my son or my husband, like I have a weekend coming up where I'm going away for a bachelorette party and my husband will be just fine. Like he does very, very well. So we are very much 50-50. Nice. He knows exactly what to do. Yeah. Which makes it a lot easier, I think, on a parent because it's hard. It's hard being a parent of a type 1 and making sure everything's good. But yeah.
When you signed up to come on, you didn't write a lot, but you said that there's a determination that's necessary to give your kids guidance and the drive that they need to succeed. And I was wondering, like, is that why you wanted to come on? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I feel like when it's something that does make you realize, I mean, it smacks you in the face at first, when you are the parent of a kid diagnosed, and you know this, I'm sure. It's your job to make sure that kid can grow up and be a full-fledged adult and be able to manage their diabetes. As I don't ever want my son to feel like he is only diabetes. Like Arden, she goes to college and she lives a very happy, healthy life. I would assume based on your podcast.
Doing good.
And to be honest, like you with how you are with her has been such an inspiration to me that if me going on and talking about my kid and the determination that we have as a couple to make my son's life like that, that is why I wanted to go on, really, because it is possible. I mean, you have these people, and I think I'm blessed and lucky that my kid was diagnosed at 3 because he doesn't remember life without diabetes. Where if you're diagnosed at 14, 15, it's probably a little harder to get they now realize, oh, my life's a lot different.
Yeah. That's one of those questions I don't know how to answer.
Me either. People ask me that all the time, and I'm like, I don't know. It's like I can see it completely both ways.
Right. But yeah, I see the virtues. I mean, if you're going to call them virtues, but I see the virtues of both, the being young and not having this like feeling of, like loss maybe. But I don't know that it doesn't matter when you get to a certain age. You can look around and see other people and feel like, oh, don't have this thing they have. Like a carefree nature, or like Arden and her friend got up the other morning at like 3:00 in the morning and they drove to the beach to watch the sunrise, right? Which I thought was lovely and everything. And so she's like, her alarm's going off and she's getting up, and, as she's leaving, I'm texting her, like, don't forget to take your supplies.
Yeah.
Like, don't, like, it sucks because, her friend's going to roll out of bed and just like, wander outside and get in the car and leave. And I'm telling Arden, like, don't forget, bring a pod, bring insulin, don't forget to put the insulin on ice. It's hot out. Like, yeah. So, I mean, I don't know that at some point you're not going to, even though you don't remember it, it's not like you can't see it in other people and go, oh, I'm missing something that they don't have.
That sucks. And that pisses me off actually as a parent, because I mean, I have nieces and nephews who like, oh, you want a snack? Go to the pantry, get a snack. Oh, you want to go ride your bike around the campground when we camp in the week? Like, but it's always with my son. I'm like, okay, we have to dose you for your snack. And make sure you bring your phone with you so you hear your alarm go off, and bring your fruit snacks. So if it's like we were camping with some friends a couple weeks ago, and one of them asked me, she was like, do you ever just like get a break? And you don't. You just don't. You literally don't.
Yeah, no, you're like, I have it on my calendar. I'm planning on dying when I'm 86.
Right.
And I'm taking the day off that day for sure.
You don't. Yeah, you don't get a break. And it made me think, it's like, no, I guess you really don't. But it just becomes second nature, I guess, in the back of your mind. I always say I only ever really relax when my son is eating and I know I timed his pre-bolus right, or when he's sleeping at night and I know that Omnipod's got him all night and we're just flying solo.
Right.
Those are like the only two times where you're not really like,
so
in the back, it's always there in the back of your mind.
I'll tell you that I don't have that overwhelming feeling any longer, but I know what it was and I lived with it for a very long time. But I do have it doesn't stop feeling. Yeah. Like that for sure. No. I don't know. It's like a noise in your house you can't find. You know what I mean? Like you're like, what is that buzzing?
And I do think, I can be 60 years old and him be married with his own kids. And if I'm on his Dexcom, which he probably won't let me be, but I'll probably be like, oh, are you okay? How's your low? Did you eat something? But I just think it's just always probably going to be there. You're always going to worry.
I think if you could see my brain, like, when you open up the activity monitor on your computer and it shows you where all the memory is being used.
Yeah.
I guarantee that there's a portion of my memory that is constantly being used for diabetes, whether I'm aware of it or not.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yep. I would agree. And I haven't been doing it near as long as you. So I feel like, if you're telling me, I'm just buckling in because it
gets better.
Forever.
Like it goes away more and more. But I try to think about people with type 1, my daughter and other people. And maybe when people say they're burned out and they're just like, I just stopped paying attention. Like, I wonder if that's not a defense mechanism almost. Like,
oh, yeah. I've wondered that.
Yeah, it sucks. It
does suck. I can't imagine the kids. Even the people that aren't kids that deal with it on a daily basis. I'm like, my kid is stronger than I would ever probably be. If you have to be, you have to be, but just even the way that these kids take it in stride and deal with life, it's amazing.
It's a good lesson that maybe you could ask more of your children than we do sometimes as well. You know what I mean? Like, look, they're handling this. They could probably handle taking out the garbage, or
for sure. Yes.
Working a little harder at school or being a little more whatever. Like we can act like, oh, they need to be kids and they need to do this. And I don't even know what that means, honestly. Like, what does they need to be kids mean? Like, they're kids. Don't worry about it. They'll be all right.
Yeah.
And it feels incumbent to say, if you let the lessons that come from diabetes really get to you without being just pissed about it, you will see there's like a leveling up that happens in a lot of areas of your life. That's for the people who make it. You know what I mean? Like, that's an easy story to tell if you're doing great. But if you're at home and you can't pull your head out of your, blankets, then, being told that there's great lessons to be learned from diabetes is not a valuable statement. So, yeah. And that's the thing you think about a lot. Like, where's my kid going to end up with all this, right?
Yeah. We could go on all day about what it costs to be a diabetic. And these kids didn't ask for that. I'm very lucky now that I don't pay a lot for our things because I have very good health insurance at the hospital I work at. But when he gets kicked off my insurance someday, it's just things like that where you're always worrying about things that I feel like most parents don't ever have to worry about their health insurance when their kid's 26,
Yeah.
But
feels like a time bomb in my house.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. compared to 2 years ago, it's been almost 2 years. I breathe a lot easier than I used to. And it's just another day. And some days are great. And we have an A1C of 6 currently. Like, you put it into the grand scheme of things, it's just life, and we're doing what we got to do. And he's having a healthy life. And if you ever do sit back and think about it, you're like, dang, this is forever for this kid. Mm-hmm. People ask me that all the time because type 1's so misunderstood too. I had somebody ask me this past weekend, so he'll have that forever? I'm like, yeah, he'll have it forever, and it's like, when you put it like that, I'm like, dang, it's got a lot of years still to have to.
Yeah. Like, even when you're saving for your retirement, like we find ourselves in this position all the time. Like there's this party that's like, oh, I would like to retire one day. You know what I mean? Like, I wonder if I could put some money together and do that. And then my wife will say, like, shouldn't we just leave it to the kids? Like, what if Arden can't get insurance when she's an adult?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh God, is that what we have to do? Like, and then some people hear that and say, they'll be all right and blah, blah. And she probably will be. But what if she's not? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what if I'm like drifting away and one day I go, oh, I did go on vacation 5 times when I was retired, or I could have left Arden that money and maybe she could have bought insulin with it for a decade or something like that. You know what I mean? So, maybe not that long, honestly. I don't go on extravagant vacations. At least she could have something. Like, what if, like, I mean, God, we say this to each other all the time. Like, what if she just ends up being a ne'er-do-well and she just kind of can't pull it together? Or what if she marries a guy who takes advantage of her and takes her money one day? Or like all the, like, nobody else thinks about that, because like, you could fall on your ass 1,000 times, but if you're on your ass and you can't afford insurance and you can't afford insulin,
right?
That's a different falling, I don't know. It sucks.
Yep.
Well, try not to think about it, because I will tell you this. Worry's a waste of imagination, and that'll probably not happen.
Yeah, no, I love that.
Yeah.
I'm always been like a worst case scenario, hope for the best, but you never know kind of person. Mm-hmm. But and back to the diabetes lesson thing, I feel like that's a lesson that we've all kind of learned. It's like, it is what it is. It will work out. Try not to worry about it.
Yeah. It's nice to have an actual physical representation in your life of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger,
sure.
Right?
Yes.
But at the same time, there's that other side of you that's like, I would like to not know that lesson.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I could use with some ignorance. Like, I'd like to walk around just pretending that like life's just easy. Like, that would be nice, Anyway.
Yep.
This is a bummer, Erica. Did you know you were going to be such a bummer?
I know. What a Debbie Downer I am.
Oh my gosh. So kid is on a pump, right?
Yes, he's on the Omnipod 5.
Omnipod 5, so he's using Dexcom G6 right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
3.5. He's always with one of you, or he goes to daycare?
Well, he goes to school now. So he was just in preschool this past year. Mm-hmm. And they did great.
How'd that go? Yeah. How did you get that set up? What did you do to set it up?
I started in the summer reaching out to the school and just saying, my son has type 1, figuring out, is there a certain classroom he needs to be in? Which teacher do you think he'd be best with? Once we kind of got all those ducks in a row, I met with the teachers a couple times over the summer, and just kind of, they met him and we kind of went over the basis of, this is what we'll do. I always send him like with his lunch and the carb count, so they don't have to figure out the math. I try to make it as easy as possible. And it is easy with the Omnipod. They just have to know how to work the controller and all of that. Mm-hmm. And then I made up folders with just some basis information. Like, if this ever happens, here's this paper you can pull out and talk to each other. If you need to call me, text me. They had a group thread with my husband and I. So anytime they would have a question, we would just respond in a text message. But they did.
What's that paper labeled? Does it say, oh shit, on the top of it?
No, it doesn't. I think when you hand it to them, though, that's what they think.
Oh,
because
yeah.
the look on people's faces, they're like, oh God, I have to keep this kid alive. And then sign up for this as a teacher. What? But yeah, we're actually starting that process right now with kindergarten. He'll be switching schools and going to kindergarten in the fall. So I'm actually like updating all his papers and going to the endo tomorrow to get papers signed. And
it's excellent.
I'm hoping it can go the same way. Kindergarten's a little more freedom than preschool was. So it'll be an adjustment, but
it's going to be like that every year.
Yeah. Even
if it's just because he gets older, or even if it's because the structure of the day changes, or all of a sudden there's more recesses, or wait till sometime. Wait till they put recess before lunch. and you think this is terrible. And then the year later, they put the recess after lunch. You're like, oh my God,
that's what we just had.
Yeah, this is worse.
Yeah, that's what we just had. So you have to figure that in. Okay, after recess, and then after recess is nap time. So you're running, and then all of a sudden now you're laying down. And you're like, oh,
just
God.
pump them full of insulin, give them something to eat, run them around, and let them take a nap.
Yeah,
exactly. But you figured out, like, what did you do? Like, gave them basically an if this, then that type of a list?
Yeah, if this, then that, if this, and that. If you still can't figure it out, call or text me. If he was ever, a couple days where his pump wasn't working right, or it was 1,000,000 degrees, or he didn't drink a lot, whatever that list of things could be why his pump wasn't working as well and his blood sugar was higher than normal, I went up to school and changed his pump a couple times and took him for ketones. And if he was fine, they were very good about it, like adjusting him. It was, we maintained a A1C of, I think it was 6.2 at the start of the year and 6.0 at the end. So
look at you. Well done.
Yeah.
Is that you, or is that Omnipod 5? Is it a balance of the things?
Omnipod 5 definitely helps, but that's the only pump we've had before we were MDI. So I guess that's all I have to know to compare it to.
Sure.
Dosing wise, the podcast actually has helped because I'm not afraid to kind of maybe overcorrect once in a while if I know a high's coming, which you don't know to do until you know to do it. But his teachers only knew what I would tell them, so, and we had it written. I think this actually came from one of your podcasts, have the endo in the papers, right? Parents have the say, the last final say. So it doesn't matter what this document says. If I'm telling you to do this, you better do it as his mom. Yeah,
just an out clause at the very bottom. Like, here are all the rules. Yep. Unless lady or guy says something different, then do what they say. Yeah.
So we did that. But the Omnipod is, very, very good. It can't keep up with all the highs sometimes. He's 5 and we have birthday cake at school sometimes for birthdays. But I don't know. We're very vigilant about it, and maybe we're too vigilant at times, but whatever I got to do.
Why would you say that? Why would you say maybe it's too vigilant sometimes?
I don't know. I just think maybe sometimes we're too hyper-focused on it. Like, I've had people say, well, I think if you just, again, and this is people who aren't parents of a type 1. So maybe this is just me thinking that I'm overzealous about it. But, you have people be like, won't it just come down on its own? Won't it just, the pump on its own, do it? But if he's riding a little high, eventually that pump will bring him down. But those little micro boluses are going to bring him down a lot slower than me just giving him a half a unit or a unit here or there. Yeah.
I think a person who doesn't understand diabetes, I understand why they would say that. If they understood the impacts of the higher blood sugar, you'd think they wouldn't say that. But
yes,
I also see a lot of people who are willing to live like that. So maybe,
agree.
Maybe not. It's just different. It's different perspectives that people have on levels of effort that they want to put into things.
Yes,
that's kind of all it is, really.
And, I will say, I don't even think it's just diabetes. I'm kind of like that in every aspect of my life.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just my personality, and that's just what I do for everything. So it's just normal for me. And it doesn't feel like extra work to me, and I feel like as a mom, that's what I signed up for. I'm going to do whatever I need to do for this kid. And if this is that, then.
I hear you. I feel the same way. I have to tell you, I was so busy yesterday. I looked at today and I thought, I'm going to record with Erica at 10 a.m. But I've been working since 7. And the truth is that right before we recorded, I thought to myself, I got to eat something. Like, what am I doing? So I'm going to take the time to eat after you and I are finished. I have to record new ads today. I have a new series that I'm doing with Arden that I have to get the microphone set up for. I'm paying more attention to my social media now because it occurs to me that I have a really strong social media presence that I don't do anything with. I was like, maybe I should do that. I'm setting up some paperwork for something. I just set up new things with Dr. Blevins to come back on and talk again about a couple of different topics. I want to get Jenny set up for the next 25 things we're going to record together. And I'll do that all day. And I'll have to remind myself tonight to stop. And I really will. I'll just keep working.
Yeah.
And I don't feel put off by that. Now, I'm not digging a hole. Listen, I've worked in a sheet metal shop before. I wouldn't be like, oh, I was super excited to weld 100,000 tanks today. I wouldn't have said that. You know what I mean? But I get that. But I don't know what people think life's supposed to be full of. You know what I mean? Like I'm doing a thing that I'm really good at and it's helping people. And like, I like that it fills my time. And I think that about kids too. Like and anything else I'm not doing, by the way, I'm going to be doing something. I helped Arden last night. She's filling out an application for something. I sat with her and helped her with that kind of stuff. And she needed some feedback on some stuff she had to put in with the application. I was happy to sit with her. My son and I watched 4 innings of a baseball game together. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't find myself bored.
Right.
And I don't get that when people are bored, I guess. Like, there's so many fun things to do or things that people can benefit from.
Yeah. And I do think, like you, how you don't get bored of the podcast and it probably doesn't feel like work to you.
No.
Because, you know, it's enjoyable. You're good at it. People learn a lot from you. You have life experience. And I think, you know, me coming on and talking, I mean, it's not nearly as involved as what you do, but it doesn't feel like I'm sitting here. Like, it doesn't feel like I'm trying to fill my time. Like, I'm enjoying doing it. And I feel, hopefully it helps people too. But that's what I kind of feel like, taking care of my son. It's like, it's just, what else am I going to be doing really with my life? I mean, those days I don't work, I might as well. I'm not just going to sit on my TV and my couch and watch TV all day. You know, what else is there to do? Yeah.
I hear that. Like people are like, well, I don't know what to do, or I'm like, yeah, I don't know. What did you think this was? Like, I always wonder that. Like, you know, especially now, kids grow up with so much stuff to do as kids. Yeah. When they stop being kids and their time's not overly managed and they're not in 17 sports or something, they're like, what is life? And I'm like, this is life. The thing you were doing before, we were like just holding up shiny objects in front of you.
Yeah, exactly.
Now run to soccer. Now run to this. Now do your homework. Now do, like, you know, I don't know. I like tasks. But I don't think of them that way. And I just,
no, I don't either.
Yeah. I enjoy having things to do. That's my point. I don't know. And there's no reason why diabetes can't be one of the things you just do without feeling like, oh, this is so unfair that I have to do this. I reserve this is unfair that I have to do this for the laundry.
Yeah, right.
I'm happy to be pissed at. Just like, do you know, I recorded an episode yesterday, and I like 2 minutes before I recorded, I ran and I put a load of laundry in and I set up a timer so that it would turn on and be done right when I was done recording the podcast so that I could put it in the dryer. And like, even that I enjoyed. I'm like, oh, people need clean clothes. Like but it's the folding it. The folding it makes me mental.
Oh, I'll fold it, but I don't want to put it away. Oh, it's the worst.
The putting away. Do you leave it stuck, or do you leave it piled around everywhere?
Currently have a pile on my dryer and in the clothes basket. And I'm hoping that we can just wear it all and I can just rewash it and I don't have to put it away.
Is there a better feeling than putting on a pair of underwear that you didn't put in a drawer?
Seriously.
You're like, no wasted time here, baby.
Right. This is service.
Well, yeah. All right. Well, we're all living the same life. It's crazy. When you said the podcast was helpful to you, can you explain to me how you found it and what it was that you found helpful?
Yeah. So actually, the endo office told me, they were like, you should really listen to this podcast, you know, and then they closet where it's like, you know, it's not medical advice. You know how they do that too, which I was like, no, that's okay. But for me, it was having you as a dad and the experience, and then listening to like Jenny talk, you know, she has diabetes. So listening to her firsthand experience and just the be bold with insulin to me was like, it just hit home, because I think it goes back to me saying when you're first the parent of a kid diagnosed, I mean, it can kill you. It scares you. Yeah. You know, like, oh, don't give too much because that can kill you. But if you don't give enough, you're going to have long-term effects and that can kill you too. And I think it feels like such a fine line. But for me, the podcast, it made that line like easier to understand. You know, yeah, you can be bold with insulin if you can understand how to catch the low. That's probably going to come after you're bold. But for me, like, that was less scary than always having to make sure I'm counting right, or not giving my kid pizza, or not letting him have birthday cake, or, you know, we'll just figure it out. So helpful in the way that it taught me not to be afraid, really, I mean, it is insulin and it can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. Oh,
that's interesting. I'm glad to know that. I really don't know. Yeah. Like, I'm just, obviously I make a lot of content, but so I'm of the mind of just like, I know a lot of things. I'll just keep saying them You know what I mean? And people will hear them and hopefully they'll help. But I never quite understand, because different people find different parts of it valuable.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear that part. Yeah. Like, so you're almost like, I'm almost like a baseball coach to you. I'm like, you can do it. Get out there, hit the ball. Like, right?
No, 100%. Yes. Yep.
It's interesting. I didn't know all this before I started. Like, seriously, like before I started, I was like, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to do this and they're going to react like that. And then like very quickly, I was like, oh, I guess that's not how it works. I guess I don't just control what everybody thinks. It's actually freeing once you recognize that not everybody's going to take the same thing from it, because then you realize, like, I'm like, I'll just dump what I know out into the world and people can pick from it. Mm-hmm. It's like a garage sale.
For me, like, first being diagnosed, when that, the doctor said, oh, you should listen to this podcast. The beginning series was so helpful. Then I knew about the podcast. So then when we went from MDI to Omnipod, I was like, oh, well, I'm going to listen to the Omnipod. And I listened to all that before we went to the training, so then my favorite episodes are the ones where parents come on and just talk about their kids, and just hearing like how other people do things and how other kids are getting through life. And I've learned a lot.
Excellent. Well, it's working then, which is really all that matters. Like at some point, trust me, it sounds so stupid. And I know it does. I think of this almost like as an artistic endeavor. Like I painted it. It's up to you to tell me what it is. Like, I don't get to tell you how the painting's supposed to make you feel. Yeah. Like, once I was able to let go of it like that, and then to hear it back from somebody like you, this is really excellent, because in the end, all I should be doing, like, there are people close to me that, help me with like kind of the emotional support it takes to make this thing. And
I can't. Yeah.
And like, I get from a friend, and it's a person you guys know, but it's a private thing for me, so I'm just going to keep who it is to me. But, she'll say to me, like, just keep doing what you think is right. Yeah. Like, it's working. And I'm like, because I'm like, well, I don't understand. Like, what did we do here? What should we have done? Like, what am I missing? And she's like, it doesn't matter. She's like, just keep doing what you're doing. And she's like, people jive with what you say. Just keep talking. And I'm like, okay. Because I can get caught up in, like, what is it I'm doing and what am I supposed to be doing? And she's like, just whatever comes to mind, just do it. And I'm like, okay, great. So I make lists and I stare at them until I go, that's the next thing I'm going to do. And then I do it, and it generally works out well. So, I should knock on wood or something.
No, yeah. Kudos to you for doing what you do. And she's right. I hope you do keep doing it, because it is very helpful. I haven't even been doing it that long. And I feel like compared to even a year ago, like when we were 6 months in, I feel like I know even more. I learn more. And I don't think I even try to, I think just listening, and you're relatable. So I think you just talking and being relatable is what makes it like, oh, if he can do that, I can do that.
That's exactly that's exactly how I feel about it. I'm like, I'm obviously an idiot. So they must be like, if he's doing it, well, hell, but you said something that I actually find to be true. Like, it's something I tell people all the time when they're newly diagnosed. I'm like, the biggest takeaway you should have today is that a year from now, you will look back on yourself and not recognize yourself. Like, you will be so much better at this a year from now if you just listen to the podcast. And they're like, well, what episodes? I'm like, almost like, I don't know. Like, just listen. It'll get to you. Yeah.
Then keep going. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It is that learning through, it just seeps in. It's not learning the way people.
It doesn't feel like learning. It's not like you're sitting in school and you're taking down notes, which is, I think, what it felt like and feels like when you're just diagnosed. They hand you this binder and they're like, here are all the foods you should eat. And but then when you listen to the podcast, I listened to an episode about the glycemic index. And then you're like, well, I want to know more about that. It's like just listening, I think, makes you want to learn more. Yeah. As somebody living with it or taking care of somebody with it. So keep doing it.
I thank you. I appreciate it. I had a business call yesterday with like a long-term sponsor who's like these, a lot of these companies use like outside PR departments to help them like figure things out and stuff. And this one company wanted me to sit down with like a consultant that they have. And they wanted to know what it is like. They're like, well, what do you do? Like, basically, like they buy ads from you, but what is it you do? And I sat down and I was like, okay. So I get on this call with this person I don't know. And she goes, what do you do? And I said, I trick people into taking better care of themselves. And she goes, what? And I said, and I just told her about the interview from that day. And I was like, I interviewed a lady today. This was her story. That, you know, like you would think we would have went in this direction, but instead we talked about this. And, you know, she's like, well, none of that has anything to do with diabetes. I'm like, I know. I said, but interjected into that conversation, I would take excursions into diabetes stuff. And you'll listen because her story is insane. You won't realize that 3 or 4 times along the hour, you heard stuff very specific about diabetes that helped you, and it'll stick to you. And I was like,
that's exactly.
Yeah, right. And I was like, and that's my model. It's not just, by the way, it's not a model. Like I sat down and I thought, hey, Erica, what's going to work best here? The way I make this, but this is just how it comes out of me. And to call it my model is reverse engineering. I'm looking back to see what it actually is. Mm-hmm. And I said to her, I'm like, I'm sure there are other people putting good diabetes thoughts into the world. I'm like, but it's so goddamn boring. Like, who would want to listen to that?
No, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
No one wants to. And I don't mean them. Like, if a person who's making a podcast right now and it's very every word they say is about diabetes, is like, oh God, he's probably right. It's very boring. Or you're mad at me or whatever. Like, don't take it personally. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about, like, in what world do I want to live Erica's life and then sit down once a week and listen to an hour straight talk about diabetes? Horrible. I need it. I don't want it.
Right.
That's how I think about it. So I'm like, so entertain people or tell them bigger stories or whatever, and then slip it in. You know what I mean? So. Yeah.
And I think then too, they'll go back to, if I have to sit down every week and know that I have to learn this information, it's going to feel like a chore, which in turn, I don't want my diabetes to feel like a chore.
Yeah. Cause you'll resent the whole thing.
Right. So that's why I think your podcast is so, because it just makes it easy to want to try new things. It makes it exciting, because if it works, then you're like, holy cow, like I can do that. I can let my 5-year-old have pizza and ice cream and mac and cheese and keep an A1C of 6.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you know?
And you push the button, dummy says something, it's funny, you laugh, and then and you by mistake you understand how to pre-bolus when it's over. Whatever. Like how, you know, like I swear the I won't bore you with it. Well, it wouldn't bore you, but it's probably going to come out around the same time as your episode. So I don't want to I don't want people to go, yeah, I just heard that one yesterday when I'm explaining it. But the woman I spoke to yesterday had a really interesting personal story, and it had fuck all to do with diabetes. Like it could just nothing, you know, but we still talked about her diabetes interspersed into it. And that's all. Like, I think
that's what's interesting. And I think that's what's relatable and nuts about the podcast. So.
Years ago, my son said, how long do you really think you can make a podcast about diabetes? And I said, I don't even think about it like it's about diabetes. And he's like, what is it? Right. And I was like, it's about people. They happen to have diabetes. That's how I think of it. Like, I'm not talking to you because your kid has type 1. I want to hear your whole story.
Yep.
You know, you're the one I'm talking to because your kid has type 1. But I would talk to you anyway. You know what I mean? Yeah. No, of course. Well, you're from Michigan. You know what to do. Yeah. We're going to be counting on you people. When those Canadians ever come over the border, you're our first line of defense.
Yeah.
Can you fight them off? They're going to come with penguins. Are you going to be ready?
Yeah. Oh, it's funny.
Seriously, they're going to throw penguins at you. I just want you to be ready for that.
I'm ready. I'm ready for anything.
You guys have 4-wheel drive trucks and shotguns, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. You'll be fine then. All right. Because we're counting on you. Because if they get to us, well, then we're all in trouble. Yeah. If they listen, Erica, when they get to the podcasters, I don't know how we're going to fight back. So I'm going to need you up there.
We got lots of needles.
I got Texas in the south and I got you in the north. That's it. When they get to the middle,
my in-laws are in Texas, so we're covered all directions.
Perfect. This is perfect. Yeah. Because whenever an invader gets to me, I'm going to be like, would you like to be interviewed about how you feel about something? And they're going to kill me. Meanwhile, I don't believe that the Canadians are coming. But
no.
Everybody seems pretty happy with where they live for the most part. Yeah. Okay. Well, is there anything we didn't talk about that we should have?
I don't think so. I feel like I've covered my story. I don't know.
Good. Do you think I'm going to call this episode Canadian Invaders?
Oh my God, that would be funny. Maybe how many listeners would you get?
Because I think calling it the Michigan Militia is going to be weird, but I think as Canadian Invaders sounds like Space Invaders to me.
It does.
Are you too young for that?
No. What a fun game.
You know Space Invaders?
Yeah, I mean, my mom probably knows it more. But grandma had a...
That was fucking hurtful, Erica. There's no reason to say that to me. Like, Jesus Christ.
When we were kids, my grandma had this little... I don't even know if you can call it a video game. It was literally, that's what it was. It was a Space Invaders game, but it was my mom's years ago.
Yeah.
But we used to play it when we were kids.
I guess Space Invaders is basically Tetris that you shoot at, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's how I remember it.
What a great game.
I wonder if she still has that. I'm going to look for it.
Well, I used to play it in an arcade.
Oh, fun.
You don't know what an arcade is. Stop it.
I know what an arcade is from
a movie. Yeah, because you saw Stranger Things. Yeah. No, oh my God, there was an arcade in the little mall by my house, and we'd go there and with quarters and play video games. And Space Invaders.
What do you buy for a quarter anymore? Nothing.
Listen, don't get me started. I will start bitching about how people treat $20 in a second if you talk to me. I'm mad. I had a long, angry conversation with a stranger in a Wawa parking lot.
Oh, wow.
Because I was like, you guys don't, he's a young guy. And I was like, it must sound like such an old man. I'm like, you don't understand. You just walked out of there with 2 16-ounce bottles of soda that you paid $5 for. And because it was 2 for $5, you think you got a deal. I was like, there's 18 cents worth of fucking soda in your hand. I was like, and you just paid $5 for it. And you did it gleefully. And he's like, what? I'm like, it shouldn't cost that much. And I was like, and your sandwich was $10. Like you just spent $15 for a glass of poison and a sandwich.
No, that's so true. I'm 32 almost, but it's almost like, even if you look at 5 years ago, I went to the store the other day and I was going to buy, we were going camping. So I was going to buy Diet Coke in a can. And I could not bring myself to buy it because of what it costs.
Good for you.
I could used to buy 4 of these for $12 and I'm going to buy one. Not a chance.
Good for you.
It's insane.
I swear to you, I went out to dinner. My kid came home and then, his girlfriend came over and then Arden came home from college and she brought a friend. And next thing you know, there's 6 of us sitting in a restaurant and the bill came and I looked at the bill and Kelly goes, what's wrong? And I was like, this is $180. She goes, yeah. Ugh. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, you're not in charge of the money, obviously. I was like, this physically doesn't make any sense. And she goes, well, there's 6 of us. And I was like, so? I was like,
it's a lot of money a person.
$30 a person? I was like, we've only been here for 45 minutes and my stomach already hurts from the thing I ate. I was like, I don't understand what we're doing.
I know, it's crazy.
No. It's very, 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 very upsetting.
That's why the Canadians aren't coming over either.
Oh yeah, the Canadians, they don't want any part of this. But they'll just fillet a polar bear and eat that.
Yeah.
They can cook them on the oil fields that they work on, from what I understand from the interviews that I've done. That's all.
That's awesome.
I still don't believe when people tell me they're from a city in Canada. There are no cities in Canada. People tell me Toronto looks exactly like New York City.
Really?
I don't believe it. How can they? On top of all that ice, what are they doing?
Yeah. Right.
I don't see how it's possible. All right, Erica, thank you very much for doing this with me.
Yes, thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Hold on one second. Today's episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. This is the meter that my daughter has on her person right now. It is incredibly accurate and waiting for you at contournext.com/juicebox. I'd like to thank Dexcom for sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast. And at the same time, I want to remind you that seeing your blood glucose levels in real time, not only the number, but the speed and the direction, is going to help you in ways that you maybe can't imagine right now. You should definitely check it out at dexcom.com/juicebox. Okay, well, here we are at the end of the episode. You're still with me? Thank you. I really do appreciate that. What else could you do for me? Why don't you tell a friend about the show or leave a 5-star review? Maybe you could make sure you're following or subscribed in your podcast app. Go to YouTube and follow me, or Instagram, TikTok. Oh, gosh, here's one. Make sure you're following the podcast in the private Facebook group as well as the public Facebook page. You don't want to miss please, do you not know about the private group? You have to join the private group. As of this recording, it has 51,000 members in it. They're active, talking about diabetes. Whatever you need to know, there's a conversation happening in there right now. And I'm there all the time. Tag me. I'll say hi. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com. Okay, Erica's 3.5-year-old was diagnosed a year and a half ago. So the kid's 5 now. It's a boy diagnosed with type 1. Talked at the beginning at the husband who just got a type 2 diagnosis, but fairly clearly he's LADA. And we talked a little bit about, termination that goes into having to raise a kid. And this was just a nice chatty one that I am going to call Canadian Invaders, even though she's not from Canada. I just think it's hilarious. I think that's it, man. I got to go, Robbie. See ya.